I was washing dishes at my and waiting tables at my dad's deli downtown Seattle, 1964, and one of our customers came in full dress whites. It was May. He came in and I looked at those because at that point I knew I was going to join the service after I graduated from high school, but having read about General Patton growing up, I wanted to be in the tank corps. So when he came in, we started talking about that. He said, "Why don't you go out to Sandpoint and I'll show you around?" So the next day I went out to Sandpoint, met him, and we went down to the flight line, and that was the end. That was it. I was standing on the flight line when jets were landing and prop planes, and I said, "No, this is where I want to be." And so we went right up to the enlistment office, and I enlisted. And because they said, "You have a really great thing here. We have the 85-day accelerated training program," which was a real limited thing that they did at certain times. It was the only time there was boot camp outside of Great Lakes and San Diego. Yeah. And so we had a boot camp, which 3-month boot camp, just about, which included flight crew training type stuff, counterinsurgency type training. And so I went home and I told my parents that I was joining the Navy. I was 17 years old. And my mother said, "Absolutely not." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, the recruiting officer is going to be here tomorrow at the house tomorrow night to have you sign the papers." So I just went to my dad and I said, "You can either sign for me this year or I can sign for myself next year. This year I've got a really great program I can enter." So my dad signed. My mom stayed in the back of the house, wouldn't even meet the recruiting officer.
Yeah, the reason I got in the Navy is because my uncle was a commander. His name was Brian Boyle, and he happened to be the commander at Sandpoint Naval Air Station at the time we went through our 85-day training. And so he being a commander for all those years, decided to recruit me and my brother. My brother went first, and he went through training and then went on the USS Kitty Hawk. And then when he was getting out of the service, that's when I was going in active duty. But I went to Sandpoint and did my boot camp there, and my like I said, my uncle was the commander, but nobody knew that he was the that we were related, except for the DIs. And boy, did they give it to me, boy! I tell you, I was picked on for everything because they knew who my uncle was, and he was the commander at the base there and stuff. And so they really gave it to me. And I remember crawling out there in the airfields and stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning and they wake us by using a old garbage can and just rattle that thing, and oh my God.
Baseball bat.
Yeah, with a baseball bat. Yeah, oh yeah. And we had all kinds of training we had to do out there and stuff like that. And then we actually had a lot of good times too. We were part of the drill team. And we got to go to the seafair parades and everything else because we were drill team, armed drill team with rifles and bayonets and everything else.
If you can call 1903 Springfields.
Yeah, right.
That's the rifles we had.
Yeah, when we were doing that, one guy got off kilter when we were doing the sequence of in and out and doing
bayonets.
With bayonets, fixed bayonets down like this. And so he got off sequence a little bit. Next thing I know, he stabbed me in the back of the arm.
It was you?
Yeah, it was me. I stabbed in the back of the arm. Fortunately, I didn't have whites on. I had blues. Yeah. And he stabbed me in the back, and it ran all down there, and it was all leaking all over the place. And so finally, when we got through with the parade and stuff, the officer said, "You better go to sick bay." So they drove me back to sick bay, and I went there to get sewed up because I had about a slash about like that big. and there was a corpsman there and a corpsman that worked with the dentist, and he said, I've never sewn anybody up before. And so the other corpsman said, well, hey, I've done it lots. You go ahead and sew him up. So he ended up sewing me up, and I still got a scar because of it.
But he went through the entire parade with that slash under his arm. I remember that because I was like 2 behind yours. I was looking and I said, oh my God.
Well, we couldn't stop the parade. We just kept on going.
Right.
Kept on marching. My blues definitely got soaked up.
One of the things I remember about the Navy, it's unusual, but when you traveled in dress blues. Well, in June, when you get off the plane in Pensacola, Florida, it's like stepping in a steam bath.
Yeah.
And we had no air conditioning in the barracks at that time.
Right.
I mean, you'd look at your towel and say, well, I know I took a shower because the towel's there.
Yeah, right.
And the first half of the boot camp, we had to wear leggings.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So we stood out. They were brown, about that high, off your boot. And then when you had to go anywhere, you had to run. Well, they could tell if you were a boot or not because you had those leggings on for the first half of the boot camp. Coming into the boot camp, what happened is I was in like Sea Cadets, and I heard about the program, and then they called me up and they said, well, you're going to be 18 on April 25th, but we only have a certain allocation, so we want you to sign up about the 1st of April. So I went to my dad. He came in to sign me in because I was underage. And he said, what do you have to do to be able to swear somebody in? Well, you have to be an officer. Oh, okay, I'm going to go home and get my uniform. He went home and got his uniform so he could swear me in.
Oh,
I'll be there.
Yeah, so my dad swore me into the Navy.
Oh. Yeah.
He was in the Air Force Reserves. He tried to join the Navy and when World War II broke out, but he had 2 dependents and they wouldn't let him join. So he joined the Army Air Corps, and then when he got home, they'd send him a letter and says, oh, we've changed our regulations. It was too late,
Yeah.
And then the other thing to remember about boot camp is the first 6 weeks were the hardest.
Yeah.
Okay, and you had to eat square meals.
Yeah, that's right.
You remember those?
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Jeez,
you
I
had
forgot.
no.
Like this. Yep.
Yes, and basically you're sitting at attention
Yep.
Right.
at the tables,
I forgot. Oh my God.
and then when you got done, you had to run over across the street to form up in the 2 different platoons.
We never walked anywhere. We ran. We ran everywhere we were in boot camp.
Right.
You never walked.
No.
Everybody else on the Sandpoint walked, but we ran.
Yeah.
Every time you went anywhere, you ran.
The only good thing about our barracks was we were right across the street from the Wave barracks, so
That's right.
That was the only good thing.
And half a block from the theater.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
that's right. Have a block.
I joined when I was 17, and the reason I did is because just before I was getting out of my junior year of high school, I was thinking, I'm going to be 18, I'm going to be drafted if I don't do something. And I want to go someplace that I want to have fun with. And I wanted to be an aircraft electrician. So I called up the recruiters at Sandpoint and said, hey, can you guys come out and talk to me? This was in April of '64. And they said, yeah. So they come out and they talked, and they said, you need your dad's permission. My dad said, where do I sign? I didn't have to worry about him wanting to sign.
It was
So
different.
he wanted to get rid of me, I guess, because at the time I was almost 6'5" and he was only 6'4". So I went out and took all the tests that you had to take before I took the oath. And I sat down, and the recruiters that came out and talked to me, they said, when you go in and talk to the chief about your designator, what you want to be, he says, you make sure you be emphatic about being an electrician. And I says, okay, why? He says, just trust us on this one. If you want to be an electrician, you tell him you want to be an electrician. So when the chief says, your scores indicate you'd be a great personnelman. And I said, I'd be an even better electrician. He goes, your scores aren't high enough. And I said, I know, but you can write a waiver for 5 points, so go ahead and write the waiver. He goes, who you been talking to? I said, I haven't taken the oath yet. He goes, no, that's all right. So he wrote the waiver, and then I took the oath, and that's how I became an electrician. It was called an 85-day accelerated training program. It was separate from regular boot camp. And we had what they called boot camp, and then we had the last part of it was what they called airman training.
Right.
So
We came out as E3s instead of E2s.
Right. And then usually all of us went the next year. The next year we went down to, I went to Memphis, Tennessee and became a aviation jet mechanic. And then other people went to schooling for everything. As soon as you got through with your schooling, then within about 2 months, you had to take the test for E3.
E4.
E4?
Yeah,
E4.
petty officer.
That's right, petty officer. And so that way we went into on active duty as an E4 petty officer. And you thought, well, that was going to help you out a lot. Well, it didn't help me out a lot because when I went down to Treasure Island, I told them, they said, where do you want to go? And I said, I'd like to be stationed in Hawaii. And so they sent me to Vietnam. I thought, hold it, how did we get that mixed up? Like I said, after your boot camp, then the next summer you went to your tech school. And
I finished up high school. He finished up high school.
Yeah, I did too. And
Yeah.
And so I graduated from high school in '64. So I went right from high school right into boot camp. And I was a little older than the rest of these guys. I was 19, so I didn't have any problem. I didn't have to have my dad's permission or anything, and he was happy to see me go because my brother was coming back. Like I said, when I got down to Treasure Island, my brother was just getting off of active duty, of 2 years active duty, and I was going on active duty. So that's the only place. That's the only time I saw my brother was down at Treasure Island.
And just so you know, when we came back from active duty, most of us had to finish active reserve, where we came back once, where we were at Sandpoint once a month after active duty. So
yeah. We had to come back here, and then after we got through with our active duty, their 2 years active duty, then you did reserve time here at Sandpoint. Weekend Warrior, and I went back to working for Boeing's, but they gave me the time off for the weekends. I had to come back here and put my time in, and primarily I worked on the P2Vs.
Yeah.
That's what was flying out of here then.
Yeah. There's a lot of memories I have. I don't know if these guys remember or not, but I was on that drill team, and because I was so tall, I was the guy in front. So I didn't see what was going on in the back. But on a couple of them in Seattle, July 4th, and we're doing that parade, I remember that somebody, I forget, one of the drill instructors came in and said, okay, we're going to get this straightened out. And he got us all straightened out again and finished the parade. But there's a lot of memories I have of boot camp itself about individuals, and I can't remember their names or what, but for instance, there was one gentleman who was told to wipe a smile off his face at a locker inspection. I remember, because he was smiling, and the drill instructor said, wipe that smile off, and he said, now wring its neck. Well, the next Saturday we had a locker inspection, and when the drill instructor opened the guy's locker, here's this little coffin. A little coffin sitting on his top shelf. And he says, what's that? He goes, it's my smile, sir. We need to give it a military funeral. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you remember that or not, but and so we give it a military funeral. I mean, things like that.
Yeah.
There were some times that didn't go so good, but those things, I don't try to remember those because the good times are the best ones.
yeah.
That's true.
One memorable experience I had it was when we were doing our reserves after our 2 years active duty. I was E5 and I went to the 5-6 club. And the result of it is out there. I met my wife
There you go.
at Sandpoint 5-6 club.
I remember that. That was a hell of a club, too.
Yeah, it was.
It was a better club than the Chiefs Club.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had a lot of fond memories. We had a lot of good times too when we were, but I think it was mainly the guys themselves. We all had to do everything together and stuff, and it was just sharing together and doing things together. And whether you had to lay on your belly and crawl around in the grass or whatever you had to do, it didn't make any difference because we were all doing it together. And when we got in trouble, we were all in together. That's right. So there was no There was no individual being picked on. If one person
Well,
did
unless
it,
you had to march off demerits.
yeah, right.
I had the most demerits.
Well, we had
Yeah, you did have the most.
We had one guy who got in trouble, and I can't remember who that was, but he was a non-person. You remember? I can't remember.
Yes,
That's right.
He was the acting, like a chief petty officer, and he got caught doing some things he wasn't supposed to be doing. For 2 weeks, we gave him what they called a silent treatment.
Right.
Nobody acknowledged him, nobody talked to him, like he wasn't even there for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I broke that though and got in deep trouble for breaking it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I felt that they were testing us because, you know, you get into a prisoner of war camp, you better be all together, you know, each one for the other.
Yep.
And I thought they were testing us, like they tested us when we were up in the Cascade Mountains and the chocolate bars disappeared.
Yeah.
Remember that? And they accused us all.
Yeah.
And they were trying to turn each of us against each other. And I
Yeah.
said, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to play that game because
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
what you have to do once we get in. So one of the greatest things I remember, 17 and testosterone flying everywhere, when I first got in, because I got my uniforms just before I went into boot camp. I mean, I was just,
Yep.
it was as fast as they could get me in.
Yep.
And I didn't know anything about shining shoes or anything, but some of the other guys knew how to shine shoes really good, and they said, you gotta get your mother's or your girlfriend's nylon stockings, because those were the best things for shining, getting that mirror finish on your shoes.
Yep.
So I thought, this is the greatest thing ever. I wrote my girlfriend and said, I need to have some of your nylons. And she went, what? So she sent them to me, and I thought this was the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
It's like it served two purposes, and it was just the smell reminded me of her, and
Yep.
and then shining the shoes. One of the things I remember about boot camp was our counterinsurgency training. When they came, it was like it was at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, came around the garbage can and the baseball bat, and jumping out of our racks, and then we had to form up, and we had to, one company was defending the hangar, and the other company was attacking the hangar. And my squad, that's when I found out why my father could not serve in World War II. He had hay fever. And so we're crawling through the tall grass with rifles cradled in our arms, going, and all of a sudden, my head started to and my nose. And I started sneezing, and I couldn't stop, and we were captured. So, and I was
You were a
not
giveaway.
Yeah,
I
it's
was
funny,
not
'cause
the
I
most
remember.
popular guy after that.
Yeah.
I remember that when that one platoon was captured, or squad was captured, and it was talk about somebody, and that was you.
Yeah.
With a sneezing it around, and I'm thinking,
That's right. One thing I like to just say is that I was talking about my uncle, Brian Boyle. He passed away 2 years ago at age 92, and one of his requests was to have his ashes sprinkled over Sand Point. So my son has a pilot's license, and so we went out and we sprinkled his ashes over the water right off of Sand Point.
One of the great memories for me is still, and it is. There's two things. First, walking off your demerits. You remember that? I got in trouble because for whatever it was, but I did clothesline duty. Had to a clothesline watch is what it was called.
Yes.
You had to walk back and forth and
Yes.
clothesline, make sure nobody stole the clothesline.
Yep.
So
Right.
and your duty was from like midnight to 2.
Yeah.
So you went to sleep, got up, did the duty, went back to sleep. I mean, it was always interrupted sleep. But you remember those things, but probably I don't know if anybody else remembers when we attacked the Special Forces
I don't
parking
remember
lot.
that.
A few of us hatched a plot because the Special Forces Reserve, the Army Special Forces, had their equipment on our what we call the grinder,
Right.
which is our PT area.
Yeah.
And so I think it was only about 6 or 8 of us got up one night. All the DIs didn't even know it, and I drew some pictures, and we went and we pasted them inside the trucks. We practiced our crawling through the grass, getting to the truck so nobody would notice, and pasting these pictures inside the trucks, which I was a little embarrassed about later because the guys really didn't think it was very funny, but we thought it was. But it says, "Greetings from Viet Cong North American Command," and so we got in some serious trouble the next day. Did any of you guys remember?
No?
Yeah, I remember, and I was trying to figure out who those people were, and never did find out.
But we all got it for it, that's for sure, because nobody would say who did it, so we all got it.
Yeah, we all got it.
Yeah.
So, and also I remember being up in the Cascade Mountains, doing sleeping in parachute tents and creating small animal traps and
Survival training.
Yeah,
Survival training.
Yep, survival training.
And and it was I also remember this. My quick close was. I remember when you were talking about the 5-point deal. I went before the chief and with my tests, and he looked at me and I said, "Well, Suckerman, what do you want to be?" And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, Suckerman, what do you want to be?" Keeping in mind, nothing mechanical. Because our tests were all, they were GCTR, is that what it's called?
Right.
They were all aptitude tests, what you were good at. And just remember that. Keeping in mind, nothing mechanical.
Yep.